Listen-only mode.
Good morning. Welcome to the October edition of the Kauffman FastTrac Author Series. My name is Kim McGrew, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to today's esteemed presenters. Jason Best and Sherwood Neiss are founders of Success with Crowdfunding, who created a regulatory framework to enable debt and equity-based crowdfunding in the U.S. and successfully lobbied Congress for its inclusion in the Jobs Act. Jason and Woody were present at the White House for the signing of this bill by President Obama on April 5, 2012. They are award-winning, successful entrepreneurs who have started, run, and sold profitable companies. They wrote the first two books on securities-based crowdfunding, Crowdfund Investing for Dummies, and Crowdfund Investing in a Day. They are at the forefront of the global crowdfunding movement and understand all aspects of being an entrepreneur, from concept to funding to sale. Their vast experience and know-how has enabled them to create best practices, tools, and training material that are essential for entrepreneurs to use when raising money through this new and innovative funding mechanism. Jason and Woody, welcome to the Kauffman FastTrac Author Series.
Thank you. It is great to be here.
I'm making you presenter right now.
Okay. All right. All right, let's put this on play. And we are good to go. Does everyone see that? I'm hoping you do.
Yes.
Okay, everyone. Thank you very much for taking the time this morning to share a few moments to learn about crowdfund investing with us. My name is Sherwood Neiss. Jason is stuck in traffic going over the Bay Bridge here in San Francisco right now, so he will be joining us as soon as possible. So in the meantime, you have my undivided attention to share all the knowledge and experience that I have with you. So let's jump on in and get started. We usually make this interactive. I know we're going to do a bit of me and just speaking up front and telling you sort of a bit about the Title II and Title III of the Jobs Act. And then we're going to open it up for Q&A, and that's really, I believe, when it gets very interesting because you guys get to share a lot of your questions that you have, and I can share my experience on addressing these questions on a global stage. Speaking of which, Jason and I just flew in from Kuala Lumpur. We were speaking at the Global Entrepreneurship Summit about the potential for crowdfunding really globally, and this is a phenomenon that is taking off not just in the United States, but around the world. There were 123 countries in attendance, over 5,000 people there to listen about the future of crowdfunding and crowdfund investing, so it's pretty exciting. All right, so let's just give a little bit of background about why we are giving you this presentation and who we are as individuals. Jason and I are not lobbyists or lawyers. We are entrepreneurs. We have both started businesses that were on the Inc. magazine list of 500 fastest growing private companies in the United States. My company was called Flavor RX. I co-founded that with my brother-in-law. We flavored medicines for children so they're more compliant. We grew it from one pharmacy to 40,000 across the United States. We did 3 rounds of private capital raising. We understand how you take an idea, you incubate it, you raise money for it, you grow it, and how you exit it. Jason is also an entrepreneur and worked for a healthcare startup in Austin, Texas, and as well, that company was on the Inc. 500 list 2 years in a row. So we have approached this entire endeavor from the point of view of people that create businesses and create jobs and understand how challenging it is to get capital in the private capital markets and what the bottlenecks are in the private capital markets. Collectively, Jason and I have raised over $87 million in the private capital markets from private equity and venture capital. So we see things not only from the point of view of entrepreneurs, but from the eyes and ears of the people that invest in entrepreneurs and what their concerns are when they're putting their hard-earned money into startups and small businesses. It was in 2010 when we were out there trying to get capital for our respective businesses and ideas that we faced the funding void that exists for all startups and small businesses. But having raised capital in the private capital markets and know what the bottlenecks were, we decided instead of complaining about the problem to draft the solution to the problem. And that solution we called the startup exemption. It was a 10-point framework that would update the securities laws to the internet age. It was based on the principles of crowdfunding, which is a large group of people pooling small dollar amounts to help fund someone with an idea. We knew that that was illegal because doing any type of solicitation on the internet breaks the general solicitation ban. It also breaks the ban on soliciting money from unaccredited investors. So those were our two challenges of updating the security laws so we could use the internet as a mechanism to solicit, and to go to our friends and family, which are part of our social network, which is the basis of crowdfunding. We shut up in Washington, D.C., went to the SEC with this framework. They liked it, they saw how it could work, but they were not in the business of crafting any more exemptions to the securities laws. We were invited to walk over to Capitol Hill, and unlike things that are happening on the Hill today as we speak, we actually were greeted with a very bipartisan group of individuals that understood what the challenges were for startups and small businesses and liked our framework. And so we were able to build a bipartisan support and got a hearing called, testified. I testified in front of a House hearing. The White House reached out shortly after that, and we gave a 2-page write-up. They got on board, and then the wheels really started spinning. The House passed our bill 40717. They took our framework, the startup exemption, and crafted the legislation. Representative Patrick McHenry in the House led that endeavor. And it passed, like I said, with 97% approval. It went over to the Senate where, as we know, it became part of the Jobs Act. It is Title III in the Jobs Act. So I'll be talking about this in more detail later on, but there are 2 parts of the Jobs Act. There's 7 parts of it altogether that affect crowdfunding. Title III, which is crowdfunding really for unaccredited investors or anyone. That's what Jason and I and Zach worked on. And Title II, which is the lifting of the ban on general solicitation, is what went into effect most recently on September 24th. And it really does allow a version of crowdfunding for accredited investors. After we were at the White House as the President signed the bill into law, we formed a couple industry groups. One, the Crowdfunding Professional Association, CFPA.org, which is the industry trade group. And the goal of that organization is to pool anyone that is interested in learning more about the industry together to learn about crowdfunding, to get best practices, to find out who they can go to for crowdfunding education or platforms. And so that's the role of CFPA. The other one, Crowdfund Intermediary Regulatory Advocates, CIFRA, is a group of really portals and stakeholders in the industry that is working to help craft the policy surrounding the rules related to how crowdfunding will play out as soon as the industry goes live. So we've gone to the SEC, I believe it's about 14 times now. Our last meeting was a face-to-face meeting with Chairman Mary Jo White. That was the end of June. It seems like most of the questions related to this have been answered and the rules are forthcoming. I wouldn't be surprised if we see the proposed rules by the end of this month. So that being said, this does not get going, Title III, until the final rules are out. And I'll probably reiterate this a couple times. You cannot crowdfund until these final rules are done, at least for unaccredited investors. If you want to go the accredited investor route, you're going to have to, you don't have to, but we would recommend that you go through a crowdfunding platform just so you stay compliant with the law. You don't want to mess that one up. So we're looking at probably full crowdfunding under Title III sometime in the middle or third quarter of next year. We also incorporated crowdfund capital advisors after we signed the bill into law, and we found out that it wasn't just the United States that was looking for jobs, but it was countries and stakeholders and governments globally. And now we have consulted with countries, over 20 governments globally. We work with them on crafting enabling policy to spur entrepreneurship, innovation, and at the end of the day, jobs. It's been exciting to see the world understand the bottleneck that we faced as well and see how this could be a potential solution for them. Our biggest client has been the World Bank. We crafted a report called Scaling Innovation. It's about how crowdfunding can help the developing world leapfrog, essentially the way China used mobile technology to leapfrog the landline, and how they can use crowdfunding now as an access to capital and a mechanism to really spur innovation in a way that they have not had the ability to before. So that report is coming out in the next couple weeks. You will see press releases on it. You can go to our website, Crowdfund Capital Advisors, and read that 100-page plus report about crowdfunding. It's really a how-to guide for crowdfunding. It really explains the variables necessary for crowdfunding success globally, because it's not just the technology. It requires that you've got social and cultural regulatory variables all aligned, and that you've got essentially this constellation of trust where you've got the parts of the industry working together to make sure that we can send money to people that we don't necessarily know, but we might trust because they're in our circle, our social network, and have a very efficient functioning marketplace. To that end, we realize that the most critically important thing out of all of this is education, education, education. You can have a ton of people with brilliant ideas, but you will never have a good business unless people are trained in how you take ideas, how you raise capital, how you grow successful ideas, how you are responsible with people's money. And so that's why we launched Success with Crowdfunding. It is an online education series that allows anyone like you who might have an MBA or might not have an MBA to say, I want to figure out how I can take an idea that I have and launch a successful business and crowdfund it. So that education series is broken up into a few parts. The first part is really what is crowdfunding and how do I approach this new mechanism of financing. The key to why we put this together is if you're going to go out and raise money from the crowd, you are going to want to be able to understand the language and speak as if you know everything there is to know about capital raising. The more you know about it, the more proficient you are at this, the more credibility you will have with your backers, and the more likely you will be able to receive your funding. The second part in our course really goes into the details around Title II, which is what I had mentioned was the part of crowdfunding that's in effect right now. And it allows you to essentially use the internet to solicit accredited investors for money. So we go into really a deep delve into the correct way to go about that, and the risks and rewards, and how to stay compliant with the law. It's really important that you follow the scope of the legislation and you don't become an example for the SEC under Title II. Our third part is going to be essentially a how-to guide. It's going to be very in-depth, several-hour online video training with exercises to walk an individual through about soup to nuts, putting a campaign together. Of course, we're waiting for the rules to come out before that part goes live so that we make sure we incorporate everything. But you can get started with the first two right now on successwithcrowdfunding.com. There's a ton of free material on there as well. So feel free to jump on in and at least grab that free stuff. I know one of the free parts of it are the course notes, believe it or not. The entire downloadable course notes are a freebie. So at least get those because you can learn a lot about Title III and what it's about in that. All right, so that's us. So essentially, here's the overview of what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the crowdfunding legislation, how it offers opportunities for innovation and challenges to the existing paradigms. We're going to talk about how crowdfund investing will create new investors and how this is a new asset class in the private capital markets. Whoops. All right. So first we're going to do the difference between crowdfunding and crowdfund investing. We're going to go into Title III of the Jobs Act and equity and debt crowdfund investing, because that's what this is about. It's not just equities. You can actually, if you're an American Main Street business, you can raise debt capital for your restaurant or food truck or whatever great cash flow business you have. We're going to talk about the role of the entrepreneur investor, the role of the intermediary and regulator, and the role of professional investors and broker-dealers. So here's the important thing. We refer to crowdfunding, and when we say it, we are encapsulating all forms of crowdfunding, but there's really two types. If you're familiar with Kickstarter, you're familiar with the fact that that is really a perks-based type of crowdfunding. It could also be a donation type of crowdfunding where you're just giving your money, and it can be a pre-order type of crowdfunding where you're pre-ordering a product. That type of crowdfunding is unregulated. It's where you are allowed to essentially part with your money. You're not necessarily expecting anything in return except for a perk if you've offered to select a t-shirt or something in exchange for your capital, or if you pre-ordered a product. Unregulated, and it probably most likely will not be regulated going forward. That is U.S. specific. I do know in other countries they are looking at regulating certain parts of the perks-based crowdfunding, particularly when it comes to the escrow money that's being held into account. So if you are listening to this from other countries, know that a lot of what we are talking about is very U.S.-centric right now. The second part of this is crowdfund investing, and that's debt or equity crowdfunding. So it's taking those same dollars that you would give or pre-order for a product or service and turning them into an investment into a business. As I said, there's been no regulation on donation. It's really in its infancy if you think about it. Kickstarter's only been around since 2009. They've funded over 44,000 projects with over $500 million. That's pretty amazing. In the global industry alone, if we look at what's going on, last year it was about a $2.7 billion industry. This year it's going to be about a $5 billion industry. When debt and equity crowdfunding kick in, it's going to eclipse what's going on the donation or perk side, just because people are going to be very interested in backing people that they know, love, and trust with a few of their dollars. But when you add that up, the potential for that with millions and millions of Americans that have not been able to participate in this type of investment or capital formation before, it's going to lead to billions of dollars. As Fred Wilson said, he's an expert venture capitalist from Union Square Ventures, he wouldn't be surprised if this turns into a $300 billion a year marketplace. Jason, Zach, and I are not so experienced or knowledgeable as Fred Wilson to be able to claim such a high dollar amount, but we love the fact that he sees the true potential in this. So the key to how this is going to work is social media. One of the things that we say often to people is you cannot crowdfund without a crowd. So if you are looking at using this as a mechanism for raising capital, do not, and I repeat, do not think that you can just throw up a campaign page and money will be rolling in. I guarantee you that less than 20%, probably more likely 10% of all the ideas that go up on debt and equity crowdfunding platforms will be successful in hitting their funding target. So you're wondering why that's so low, when in fact if you look at what's happening on donation or perks-based crowdfunding campaigns, it's probably around 40% of companies that hit their funding target. Well, the reality is people look at investing in a very different light than they look at donating or pre-ordering a product or service. And they are a little more critical with their dollars that they invest than when they're donating that money. And so people are going to be critical on these campaign pages, and if you've been on any of them, you know that there's a whole stream of comments where people can share their thoughts about the idea, about the team. In the future, they'll be sharing ideas about the revenue model, how their use of proceeds are put together, and what they're going to. if you as an entrepreneur cannot defend why you have put any of that out there up on that campaign page, you will not win the credibility of the crowd and you will not hit your funding target. You will invite people to that campaign page, most likely through your social network. That's your crowd, your Facebook, your LinkedIn, your Twitter, your Google+. I'll talk about this later on, but if you are not engaged in social media yet, you should figure out how you can become engaged in that. Start inviting friends to your social network. Start tweeting like mad. Start creating blogs around your business idea and invite people to read those blogs and then get them into your social network. Google Plus is a great mechanism for that as well. LinkedIn is not only a great place to build a network of engaged people, a community of more business associates, but you too can post blog entries up there and share them with people and engage further people in that. So we think that that's something you should do. Another key to why this will be an efficient, transparent marketplace is the platforms itself not only provide the mechanism under which this happens and a digital footprint, but they're going to standardize the process. And we're going to find out that we've got documents that become standard in terms of raising money. And that's going to make it easier for entrepreneurs to go out there and put out the disclosures that they need. And disclosures are documents like your business plan, your use of proceeds, and your valuation. That type of standardization, not the details within the business plan, but the fact that you've got a framework for a business plan, a framework for a use of proceeds, will allow investors to come in and look at deals side by side and decide if they've got all the information and if that deal is right for them. So that'll streamline everything. It'll reduce costs. It'll increase transparency. It'll increase efficiency in the marketplace, and we think it'll lead to, like Fred Wilson said, quite a large market. So let's talk about the Jobs Act itself and the different components to it. In Title III of the Jobs Act, which is essentially the framework that we wrote, there's $1 million per year cap on what a company can raise. Okay, so if you need to raise over $1 million, well, this is not how you're going to do it. If you want to raise $100,000, yes, this is a potential opportunity for you to raise money. However, keep in mind that this is all or nothing financing. Very much like Kickstarter has all or nothing financing. What that means is if you set a funding target of $100,000, you must hit that funding target of $100,000 before your campaign expires, or the money that was committed to that campaign from investors would go from the escrow account when they commit their capital back to the investors. Now, this is important for a couple reasons. First, we don't want people fishing for money. So if you need $100,000, we expect you to tell investors how you're going to use that $100,000, what you're going to use it for, and disclose it to them so that they can see what you're going to do with it. We don't want you to hit 80% of your target and then fail as a business because you disclosed that you needed $100,000, only got $80,000, spent $80,000, but because you were lacking the other $20,000, your business failed. So we put the all-or-nothing financing requirement in there to actually raise the bar, make it a little harder for you to work, and raising money should never be easy, to get that capital so that you can be successful with what you say you're going to do. We believe that that will increase the chances of success. So if you're thinking, I'm going to go out and raise $1 million off the bat, keep in mind if you get commitments for $999,995 and you run out of time, all of that money goes back to the investors. So be strategic when you're going out there. Think about lean startup methodology. Think about raising money in tranches. We talk about all of this in our Success with Crowdfunding online video education training, because it's important for you to think the way real entrepreneurs think when they go out and raise money from private equity and VCs. They want you to be thinking very strategically. They don't want you to be grabbing for cash and spending it willy-nilly. So that's the all-or-nothing requirement. Now, there's going to be limits on how much investors can put into it. This really comes down to when Jason, Zach, and I were looking at how do we define investors today. It was the accredited investor status. Accredited investors are investors that make over $200,000 a year for the last 2 years, $300,000 if they're married, or have a liquid net worth of $1 million or more outside of the home equity in their house. So when we were looking at that, we're like, okay, income or net worth, why don't we apply that same standard to coming up with ways in which we can limit how much investors, unaccredited investors, can risk, because we know from the point of view of regulators, they're very concerned about grandma losing all of her money because she's putting all of her eggs in one basket or all her chips on one investment. So the way in which we protect investors is we put caps on income or net worth. And the way it is in the legislation is if you make under $40,000 a year, essentially you can invest up to $2,000 per year in all campaigns. And that's $40,000 of income or net worth. If you make under $100,000 of income or have $100,000 of net worth, you can invest up to 5% of that income or net worth into crowdfund investments over all of them over the whole year. If you make over $100,000 and have over $100,000 of net worth, you can invest up to 10% of your income or net worth into all crowdfund investment opportunities over the course of a year, provided that you do not go over that cap. There's going to be, so that restricts how much investors can put into it. This, it does restrict it. A lot of this will be self-disclosure, so investors will be self-disclosing as they register on these portals how much money they make, and then the technology will probably tell them if they're trying to go over that investment threshold based on what they disclosed. And so we can have bumpers along the road, but we can't stop people from speeding. That's really the basis for what we're doing here as well. We have, we're going to have limits on where you can go to raise this money. Under Title III, you cannot just go out to anyone and say, hey, I'm raising money. You have to do it through either a funding portal or a broker-dealer. A broker-dealer is someone that probably everyone's familiar with in terms of any of the big names like Schwab or Fidelity or just anyone that you have your money parked with. They will be able to facilitate these type of transactions if they get involved in it. There are broker-dealers that are looking at this space like Gate Technologies that will be the broker-dealer for the crowdfunding space, and many others that are looking at this as an opportunity to facilitate capital formation on the smaller end of the spectrum. The other side is a funding portal, and a funding portal is really going to be a white label. It's going to be a company that doesn't do any soliciting for investors. They are very restricted in what they can do. They can't handle any of the money. A broker-dealer can keep the money in escrow on behalf of the entrepreneurs. So funding portals, it was meant to be a carve-out to reduce the cost of capital in terms of managing the whole process. So you're going to have to decide whether or not you want to use a broker-dealer that can actually probably bring more investors to your investment. If they want to promote one deal over another deal, a funding portal very likely won't be able to be pushing one deal over another deal because they're not allowed to offer essentially investment advice, which broker-dealers can. So in Success with Crowdfunding, a lot of what we talk about is how do you go about picking the right funding portal or broker-dealer for you. So those are some of the keys to keep in mind too. The other part of this is not, let's get that out of the way. This is not going to be overseen by the state regulators. This is preempts them. This is federal legislation. So it's overseen by the Securities and Exchange Commission and FINRA, which is the Financial Intermediary Regulatory Authority. They oversee the broker-dealers and the portals. So the SEC oversees the industry. FINRA essentially oversees the actors in the industry to make sure that they are compliant with the rules. You are going to want to make sure that you are compliant with the rules. So if you are an entrepreneur and you want to go down this path, you're going to have to submit to a criminal or securities fraud background check. That's the very first step that you're going to have to go through. If you've got a checkered past at all, it's very likely that the portals or the broker-dealer will not want to put your campaign up there. So the beauty about this is before people like Bernie Madoff or if they had a checkered past could go out there over and over again and solicit money. Now we've got these criminal background check put in there. The goal of that is to deter people from committing fraud, particularly those that have a checkered past. You've got companies like Early IQ and CrowdCheck, which are looking at both backgrounds and how do we look at the disclosures and make sure that everything's in place, and I'll talk about that in a second because that's a lot of what CrowdCheck does as well. The legislation prescribes that you have a business plan. So you're either going to have to figure out how to write a business plan, you're going to use business planning tools like Business Plan Pro, or you will go to companies like the Funding Roadmap, which is an online tool, and you'll be able to fill out a business plan there, which is great. Using technology to help you figure out how to be compliant is the way to go with this. A lot of this is Q&A, and you can fill in the blanks and do what you need to do. You're going to have to tell people the type of securities that you're offering and the valuation. For a lot of you, you're going to be wondering, wow, how do I even go down that path? Again, this is stuff that we go into in a lot more detail with Success with Crowdfunding. But essentially, on a very high level, you're going to want to probably talk to some peers. You're going to want to probably talk to some other individuals that have raised capital and get an idea for them about what your business is about, the type of security that you should probably go out there and offer. And then you're going to want to socialize that, believe it or not, before your campaign goes live with the people that you think are going to be funding your campaign, because you're going to want to know from them before you get started if they understand what a common stock is, how much percent of the company you're willing to part with for the dollars that you're trying to raise, and you want to get a feel from them whether or not they think that's a fair valuation. Okay, that's the type of stuff that you're going to then go back and put into your valuation and explain why you chose that type of valuation. That will help you pass that all or nothing threshold because you're going to have to defend that in front of the crowd. You will use social media to solicit people. Like I said, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google+. When your campaign goes up there, you will say, hey, I'm raising money for XYZ business of mine. Come check out my campaign page. You're not going to be able to say things like best investment ever, guaranteed return. All of that stuff is not allowed when you are out there trying to get people to your investment page. It's going to have to be bland, but that's okay because this is about you going out to people that you know and getting them engaged in your idea. Those people are going to come in, and that's where the crowd diligence and wisdom comes into effect. They are going to be looking at your campaign. They will be looking at your business plan, your use of proceeds. They will be picking apart your knowledge and experience and asking you questions about whether or not you are right for this job and forcing you to defend it yourself in that capacity. That's called vetting, and that vetting takes place with angels and VCs behind closed doors, and it's the same type of vetting that will take place online with the crowd. And that's part of the hurdle in terms of raising this. Two parts. One is the questions that they're going to ask, to which you're going to have to defend it, but the second part is you have a social network, and unless you know everyone that is in that social network that you are going out there seeking money from, some of them might not be very close friends to yours, or some of them you might have in there, but they might not really necessarily like you. They could actually turn out to be bottlenecks for you. So make sure you know who is in your social network before you start inviting everyone out there. One of the things that we've seen on campaign pages where fraud has been, where it's been tried to be perpetrated already, is that these people have invited people from their social network to their campaign pages, and those people were like, listen, this isn't true. I was working on this project with this person on another thing. This isn't his idea. Or they copied this, or this product already exists. I was working on it over here. So transparency is what this is all about, and we believe the crowd can bring that wisdom to the table. The difference between investors before and investors now is investors are not playing a passive role. So it's not like buying stocks in Apple on a public exchange where you're hoping that the next iPhone leads to a higher return. Your job as investors that are investing in crowdfunded investment opportunities is to become a brand advocate, a marketing engine for the business, because now your return on investment is tied to how successful the business is. And you can actually help drive that by driving more eyes and ears, not only to the business, but if they go out for even a follow-on round of financing, you can actually go out there and say, listen, this company's doing great. I think you should become an investor in it too, and collectively we can help grow bigger businesses. Let's talk again about the intermediary and regulators. As I said, they can be either funding portals or broker-dealers. All of them must perform a minimum amount of duties. That is that background check, the investor education, and the standardized disclosures. So the standardized disclosures, business plan, use of proceeds, evaluation, and how you came to it. Investor education, again, this is something that we provide with Success with Crowdfunding for investors as well. It's really just making sure that they go in with their eyes wide open. Nobody wants anyone to lose their money because they just threw it out there. So we have to make sure people understand that when you make an investment, there's no guaranteed return on that investment. There's no timeline attached to exactly when you're going to get that investment back. You might get it in 5 years. It might not be the amount that you put into it. It might be greater than you put it, the amount you invested, but there's absolutely no guarantees. And so everyone must let investors understand, have education to understand the risks and the rewards of investing in crowdfund opportunities. These are private shares. They are not traded on a public exchange, so there's really no essential immediate liquidity. And by that I mean if you buy a share of Apple today, you can sell it tomorrow. If you buy a share of private company XYZ on a crowdfunding platform, tomorrow you're not going to be able to sell that share for 2 reasons. One, the regulation requires that you hold on to that security for 12 months. But the other is that security is not listed on a public exchange where some other person can necessarily look at it. Now, the one caveat that I will give to that is in 12 months after you have holded on to these securities, you will be able to list them on an exchange, and these are secondary exchanges that will pop up. However, at that point, it will depend on supply and demand. So if there's no buyers for a security, it's not like you will necessarily have liquidity at that point too. So for investors, we tell you all the time, consider this a very long-term strategic investment. Make sure this is only a small part of your overall portfolio. Investing in private companies is high risk. More than 50% of them fail within 3 years. So you need to know that going into it. High-risk investments should never be more than 10% of your overall portfolio. And consider crowdfund investments to be part of that high-risk investment. So maybe not all 10%, but maybe 2 or 3%. So it should be a small part of what you're doing. Like I said, the funding portals are going to have a hands-off approach. They're going to outsource critical roles where if the funding portal were to go out of business, we could make sure that people don't lose their money or their shares, and that's the escrow or transfer agent roles. All funding intermediaries, including broker-dealers and funding portals, will be registered with the SEC. Funding portals, as I mentioned, are not allowed to give investment advice. And like I said earlier, FINRA will be the self-regulating organization to provide oversight for the industry. Why is this important? Well, in 2011, over 500,000 new businesses were started in the United States. Okay, so 500,000 a year. In 2011, only 3,600, or about 3,700 deals were funded by VCs. That's less than 1%. So that's why when you hear people saying, oh, I've got a great idea, and someone says, go out to VCs, we're often saying that's not where you go for money because your chances of getting money from them are very ridiculously small. This now offers you the opportunity to go out to people that know you and think that you might have a good idea that is a good investment for them and raise money from them. There are two paths for companies that use crowdfund investing: Main Street businesses and high growth companies. Main Street businesses are your like Main Street American businesses. They've got customers. They've got products and services. They could be little grocery stores, or they could be restaurants, or they can be souvenir shops, but they will have cash flow. And those are the type of companies that have been really affected by the downturn in the economy and are not able to go out and raise cash. So they will be able to use debt crowdfunding for their businesses and raise short-term money to help them expand, buy an additional business, do whatever they need to do that they say they're going to do in their business plan. The other will be high-growth companies, and these are going to be companies that have an exit opportunity, and so for that they'll probably be seeking equity investors. The same type of people that would probably go to VCs but probably got turned down by angels or VCs. They can now go to the crowd and say, listen, I want to raise money from you, and see that there's social proof for this business or idea, get that proof of concept up and running, build it, use your investor's mouthpiece as a way to build traction, and then you can go back and get VCs or angel money, and probably a lot easier. High growth companies that succeed in using crowdfund investing for seed stage capital, like I was saying, will be additional deal flow for private equity and VCs. The beauty about all this is crowdfund investing will give you the opportunity to demonstrate that you can do what you say you're going to do, that you've got a place in the market, that you've got customers that are interested in buying your product or service. All of that de-risks the investment for follow-on money. That's important. Your investors, angels and VCs, the biggest questions that they have are, is there a market for this product? What does it look like? Who's buying it? And how do I make sure that it's going to grow? Crowdfund investing allows you to go out to the crowd before anyone's sort of put a dollar to use and let you know right off the bat whether or not they think it's a good idea. And then once you have the money, to show the crowd that you can execute upon it, and then allow them to go out and build that market for it. So here's some tips and strategies. You need to make sure that you understand everything around this, the process, the psychology involved with both crowdfunding and crowdfund investing. So really experiment before you get going. I would tell you to go out to Kickstarter if you haven't already, and start trying to play around and get familiar with how it works. So you can understand the way it's structured. You can take a look at the way the campaigns are put together. Go to crowdfunding platforms like Seed Invest, Early Shares, see how they have campaigns listed. If you're going for debt or equity, if debt, SomaLend would be an opportunity for you to check and see how campaigns are structured, and get a feel for the campaigns that are successful, so you could mimic success. You're going to want to look for funding platforms that you believe are leaders in volume or approach, and we talk about that success with crowdfunding. You're going to want to probably start identifying and take a look at where those secondary markets exist. So if you do have an equity play, you can let your investors know that part of a potential liquidity for that event might be a secondary market like Gate Technologies down the road. Start talking to these funding portals and begin a conversation with them, because you're going to have funding portals that are focused on different verticals. So get familiar with those verticals and what they focus on. You have to apply to a funding portal. You don't automatically necessarily get accepted to every funding portal. So get to know all of them, as many of them, to see which one's going to fit for you. And compare the experiences that you have with other people that you meet. Attend crowdfunding events. Talk to people about best practices. You can learn a lot from them outside of our education series. And here's some tips that can help you, and what we've learned from 5 years of perks-based crowdfunding. There's this 30% rule for social proof. If you can hit 30% of your funding target, you'll most likely hit 100% of your funding target. And it's really critical that you hit that first 30% in the first very few days of your funding campaign, because what that does is it shows other people in the crowd that you've got traction, so they'll come in with the follow-on capital to help you hit 100% of your funding target. The majority of contributions will come from your first or second degree connections. Don't assume, again, that you put a campaign page up there that everyone that you know will fund it. They won't. But assume that it will come from your first or second degree connections. You need to understand why people give to these platforms. It's about passion. It's about being part of something bigger than themselves. You're going to want to focus on that with the people that you're trying to engage in your idea. And so take a look at some of the campaigns and look and see how people engage other people in their passion. You're selling not only your product or your service, but you're selling yourself. And passion goes a huge, very long way in why investors put their money behind individuals, because they believe, wow, this person is ridiculously passionate about this product, service, solution, and I think they'll be able to execute upon it because of that passion. Communication is key. If you are not comfortable communicating, you better get comfortable talking. Answering questions over and over again, the same question. You have to get very comfortable talking to a bunch of people, answering the same questions, and even if you do hit your funding target, making sure that you are communicative with them over time, because the worst thing that you can do when you take people's money is be quiet, because then they're wondering what happened. So communication is critically important. And keep in mind, raising money on perks-based sites takes a lot of work. This is not easy money. It does not flow in. This will be like a double full-time job for you. Everyone that's been successful with crowdfunding will tell you, oh my God, this was 3 times as hard and as much work as I thought it was going to be. But the people that were successful spent the time up front before they went live to study and learn best practices, what they need to do to make a winning campaign, what a video should look like, what that should include, and put a ton of time and energy into their campaign before it goes live so that it's the best that it can be facing outward, and then it's your job to be using your social network to pull people in. I think we've got about 10 minutes, so I do want to try and get to Q&A. So I'm going to try and move through these last couple slides, and then we'll open it up for questions so we get at least 10 minutes in. Again, identify the platforms that you think are going to be leaders in the space. Survey the landscape. Select a small number of platforms to look at. Learn if you're an investor. Learn about the process of determining what makes for best practices for investing. Remember to go in with your eyes wide open. Engage in the process as an investor. Understand the motivations, frustrations, and opportunities from the entrepreneur's point of view. Investors need to monitor companies over time. They need to follow up with them offline. They need to understand, one of the things that we tell investors too is spread your investment out. So that 10% that I was telling you about, and if you take a small percent of that, don't put it all necessarily in one investment. Consider putting it in multiple investments, 2 or 3. You'll learn a lot from that as well. This is the diligence, as I was talking about, will come from both what you put up there in terms of disclosures, from what the platforms seek of you in terms of deciding whether or not to put your campaign up there, and from what the investors or the potential investors do with the information that you put up there in terms of critiquing it. The secondary market, as I was talking about, 12-month holding period, that prevents pump and dump schemes that we saw in the 90s where people were selling shares to unknowing investors and dumping them on them, and they were stuck with those shares. Like I said, after 12 months, they can be listed on secondary markets. You're going to want to identify the secondary markets that really have the most eyes and ears on them, and create strategies for how this can be utilized. Build relationships with the funding portals. I was talking about that. And action steps. So prepare. Come up with milestones that you want to achieve. put those milestones out there. That's part of this lean startup methodology. So create milestones in your business plan, create milestones in your crowdfunding campaign, put that out there in full disclosure. As you hit those milestones, let people know that you've hit them, show excitement for hitting them, and then you can go out there and probably raise more capital later on. So keep in mind these do's and don'ts, and then we're going to go to Q&A. So we've got donate to a crowdfunding platform to get the experience. This is going to happen, so get prepared. Plot a strategy for how you're going to play in this space. Talk to securities lawyers. Get their advice. Go to events and learn about what's going on in the industry and best practices. Create strategies to deal with capitalization table issues. People want to know how you're going to deal with 50 or 100 investors. That comes down to communication. So be prepared to answer questions about how you're going to talk to all those investors. Consider all channel partnerships and opportunities that will emerge in this space. There's going to be people coming in to help facilitate how you get your campaign up and running. You're going to want to look at all the options out there and consider using them. It might cost you a little extra, but at the end of the day, the people that spend the time and money to put a campaign together up there will be the ones that are more successful at raising money later on. This is going to be a $300 billion a year market, hopefully, so get your slice of it, and don't wait. Get started right now. We've got Success with Crowdfunding, like I was saying. It's got a bunch of free information up there, and then you can always reach out to us. I believe that's not on this slide, but let's just go to that one. Jason Best or Sherwood Neiss, Sherwood at the CCA Group, successwithcrowdfunding.com, and follow us on Twitter. So with that, why don't we go to Q&A in the remaining time that we have so I can make sure that I've answered some good questions out there.
Okay. Thanks so much, Woody. We do have several questions, so we'll start at the top of the list. What states have enabled legislation for this so far, and which are the most successful?
The question was which states have enabled legislation for this?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I believe that there are about 7 different states that either have legislation complete or pending. I don't have that list right in front of me right now, but on our website we actually have a report that's going to be coming out about comparing the different state legislations. So you can go to crowdfundcapitaladvisors.com and get that in the next couple of weeks. I'll make sure that's on the front page, so if you do want to see which states are live, because it's pending legislation does not mean you can do it. You can see what works for you. I think that's a great way to get into it. Keep in mind, though, that your social network is not constrained by state borders, and many of these state offerings are constrained by state borders, so your investors are going to have to be in those states too. So your ability to raise capital will be restricted on who you can solicit and raise capital from.
Okay, thank you. And what about filmmaking? How does that work with crowdfunding?
Ooh, I missed the first part. What about what making?
Filmmaking. Oh,
filmmaking. Yeah, so filmmaking is a great way to make movies. Filmmaking is one of the areas where people see a lot of opportunity for crowdfunding. There's in the film industry already. There's a way in which they raise capital for a lot of movies. It's called revenue-based financing, and essentially what it does is they commit to give back a % of the revenue that a movie makes over time in exchange for the investments up front. That will be a type of investment opportunity for filmmakers going down this route. Again, they won't have to go to the major film studios, but they'll be able to go to their friends or family or social network and really maybe offer that same type of revenue-based financing. Or, you know, you can do the perks, which is what we're currently seeing on Kickstarter type campaigns, where you can give them a credit in the movie itself, or maybe a small role. But there's different ways in which you can approach it. I do think many filmmakers that are familiar with revenue-based financing will go to crowdfunding platforms for filmmakers that are what they call RBF type platforms themselves.
Okay, thank you. Another participant says that Kickstarter costs 10%, including the Amazon fee. Do you know what the target fee will be for crowdfunding investment portal?
Yeah, it'll probably be a little more than that because think about all the different components that are going to go into a campaign when you've got the background check, when you've got the technology for the deal rooms, and the deal rooms really is the area that holds all the data that you upload there. The reporting tools that are going to be integrated into the crowdfunding platforms. The escrow and transfer costs of holding the capital and transferring the shares to the investors. All of that is called what we is called the cost of capital. And so I wouldn't be surprised if it's between 12 and 14% of the total amount to get the money that you need. Now, you might think that that's high. There's two ways to think about this. If you can be successful at raising your money where you're not successful in the first place, well, congratulations, you just received 88% of the money essentially that you needed. You should really budget for those fees, by the way, in your use of proceeds. The other thing is this is just that cost in many cases can be cheaper than going out to traditional sources and looking for capital too. So over time, I think with competition, we'll see efficiencies in the marketplace develop and maybe even those costs come down.
You had given some websites. One was Kickstarter. But would you please repeat the names of the other sites that you were suggesting that people go out and take a look on about crowdfunding?
Sure. In the equity space, you've got early shares, seed invest, crowdfunder. In the debt space, you've got, if you're doing peer-to-peer, you've got Prosper Lending Club. If you're doing peer-to-business, SomoLend is a debt-based crowdfunding platform. In the perks base, everyone knows Kickstarter. You've got Indiegogo, Rocket Hub. There's over 700 platforms globally now. So if you go to Crowdfunding Professional Association, I believe there's a list of all the current platforms. Our website contains a lot of information like that too. So you can get that information on crowdfundcapitaladvisors.com or successwithcrowdfunding.com.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have several more questions here, but let me just go through. Can you promote on more than one site at a time, like Kickstarter and Indiegogo?
That comes down to the terms of service agreement that each portal has. I believe that those on their portals right now, they don't want you or allow you to do that. And I'll tell you why you shouldn't do that. People are going to see it as fishy. If you've got the same campaign on two sites, people just won't, and even if you divide the campaign up into two, say you're going to raise $25,000 on this one and $25,000 on another one, people are going to just naturally believe, oh my gosh, it's the same campaign, that they're trying to rip us off. So be very careful about using multiple portals to raise money because investors, you've got, in many cases, you're going to have just a few seconds to get their attention. If they start spending a little more time, you're lucky enough to have a few more minutes. If they have any questions, they're going to just bounce off of it. So I would stick with one portal and use the principles of crowdfunding, which is your social network to get more eyes on it. Don't use multiple portals to get more eyes because, like we were saying earlier, it's your first and second degree connections that are going to be funding you, not the third degree people out there that don't really know you.
Thank you. Are there any specific business areas that seem to do better on crowdfunding on the platform that seem to do better than others?
It's really early right now, so we're yet to see what the true trends are. But like I said, the Main Street type businesses, if you've got a dry cleaner, if you've got a restaurant, if you've got a food truck, you'll see those type of people succeeding on debt-based crowdfunding platforms. On the equity-based crowdfunding platforms, I think you're going to see a lot of people coming out of business plan competitions, events like South by Southwest. They'll be crowdfunding their essentially business at these events. So a lot of tech type of startups will be successful in the equity space.
All right, thank you. We do have many additional questions here, and just so that you know, the information here to contact Jason and Woody is on this slide. And Jason, Woody, thank you so much for your time and insight. To our listeners, thank you for joining us. As a reminder, we will post these slides and the recording of today's webinar on Monday and send out an email notification alerting you of its availability. That's found at our website at www.fasttrac.org/authors. Please be sure to mark your calendar for next month's author series on Wednesday, November 6th, featuring Bill Matthews and Dave Sullivan, who will discuss their book and related work called 5 Ps to a Wow Business. Thank you and have a great day.